Welcome to Crescat's Market Call, featuring our macro and activist mining research. I'm Kevin Smith, Crescat's founder and chief investment officer. Before we get started, please read through our important disclosures being shown now. These and additional disclosures regarding the risks involved in the type of investments we will be discussing, as well as the fund's performance, can be found on Crescat's YouTube channel or on our website using the QR codes on the slides. The type of investments discussed on these videos can carry significant risks, including risk of loss. The videos are intended to be general discussions of macro investment themes, the mining industry, and news with respect to the companies in our activist metals portfolio, and are not intended to be investment advice or an offer of investment advice or services. Crescat's managed funds only accept accredited investors, and the discussion in these videos has been prepared with that level of audience sophistication in mind. Any forward-looking statements may or may not come to fruition. If you enjoy our videos, please click on the like button and make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel to get notified of upcoming episodes. You can also follow Crescat Capital on X for ongoing macro research and important news updates on our activist metals positions. If you want to learn more about Crescat's investment strategies, we encourage you to reach out to our head of investor relations, Merrick Iwahashi. His contact information is on the screen now, and it can also be found on our website at crescat.net. All right, everybody, welcome and thanks for joining us. We have I have Tavi here with me today, who will be doing a macro update in just a couple minutes here, and Quentin will be joining us again, but with pre-recorded segment that he recorded yesterday, so it's pretty fresh. But he's been traveling and out in the field again, and so he had to pre-record. But so we have an exciting show for you today. I wanted to update everybody on our hedge fund strategies because Crescat has been having a great year, and we are we continue to have a good month across the board in July, and our funds, all 5 of Crescat's hedge funds are are among the top 6. We have 5 of the top 6 hedge funds in the Preqin database through July for year-to-date performance, and all of our funds are pushing new high watermarks now. With global macro also being the only one that is just a few percentage points shy of that all-time high watermark there, but it's global macro is the one that's performing best year-to-date as well. So. I encourage you to, check out our funds. I think we have a lot of exciting themes across the portfolio and positions, and I think there's a lot more good performance to come. No guarantees, but I really believe we have a lot of tailwinds, with respect to our themes in our portfolio, and it's still very early innings, especially in our activist metals theme, and we have 2 funds that are dedicated to that theme, the Crescat Precious Metals Fund and our Institutional Commodity Fund, which are both dedicated to our activist metals portfolio, which at this time is a long only portfolio of mining companies. And let's go on to the next. So one thing I'm really proud of this year is that we have just, with last month's performance, just completed our first 5 years of track record and performance for the Precious Metals Fund. So we launched this fund on August 1st of 2020, and it, in hindsight, that was a time when gold had actually just peaked, and for that time frame, it had a big run in early August, and gold stocks had just peaked as well. But it was a time when the junior mining segment of the market was still performing really well, and that's where our portfolio was focused. And so we continued to have very strong performance from that launch date into May of 2021, and we're off to a great start. But the metals and mining industry has gone through a bear market that's really been basically a 14-year bear market. And while gold has broken out to new all-time highs, and silver is starting to break out now too, the mining equities have really underperformed. And that's why we decided with our macro themes that this was an area that we wanted to focus on. And so we started this sector-focused fund, the Precious Metals Fund. It's an equity-focused mining investment fund focused on precious metals. Gold and silver are the predominant assets that we're going after. We do have some base metal targets in our portfolio as well: copper, zinc, nickel, and so forth. But it's predominantly a gold and silver based equity portfolio, and it is among the top performing sector focused funds also in the Preqin database, and something that we'll be talking about more. But the fund is the Precious Metals Fund is really starting to perform again and is at a new high watermark now, and it's outperforming all of the benchmarks. And we now have a 5-year track record. So come check it out. I think we're still in the early innings of a new bull market for precious metals mining equities. And I think we have a killer portfolio. Let's go on to the next. So this is looking at all of Crescat strategies and performance updated through July, including the side pocket performance. Back on July 1st of 2024, one of our private company investments that we had in our portfolios, San Cristobal Mining, which owns a large silver mine in Bolivia, was our auditors, Deloitte had pretty much forced our hand into putting that into a side pocket. We took it to a shareholder vote, and which passed with overwhelming approval, and we moved that asset into a side pocket on July 1st of 2024. So we show both the X side pocket and the full fund performance, including the side pocket now, and you can see that including the side pocket, all of our funds are also performing really well year to date and hitting new high water marks, with the exception of global macro, still just a couple percentage points behind that high water mark. But with the, both X side pocket and including side pocket, all of our funds except global macro are in new high water mark territory. I'm really excited. What differentiates the global macro, institutional macro, and long short hedge funds from the more long only metals focused funds is really that we have all the other macro themes of our fund. The equity focused ones we were able to express in the long short hedge fund, and in the two macro funds that's where we can trade any asset class, including currencies, commodities, fixed income, as well as the equities. And so the activist metals theme is one of our largest themes in those funds too, but we have all the other themes, and including the short positions, and especially the equity short positions that we have in global macro and long short that have helped those two funds to be among the top performing hedge funds in the world year to date. And I think there's so much more to play out there too for those themes. And let's look at why in this next slide, which is my last slide, and that is that I believe very strongly that we are in another tech bubble, an AI bubble, that is responsible for creating the most overvalued large cap U.S. equity markets that we've ever had. more overvalued than 1929, more overvalued than the dot-com bubble, and more overvalued than where we were back in 2022 at that intermediate market peak that we had back then. There's a chart that I'm not showing today, but I'll update it again soon, that I've shown in the past, that I think exemplifies the extent of this bubble more than any other. And that's when you look at the top 10 market cap stocks in the US relative to GDP. And you can look at it relative to US GDP or global GDP. It shows the same thing. We are truly at the highest valuations for this concentrated group of large cap stocks that we've ever been. And in fact, we're 160% higher, 2.6x higher on the EV to GDP measure of the top 10 S&P 500 stocks relative to GDP versus where we were at the peak of the tech bubble. So a lot of these comparisons will try to say that we were a higher valuation in the tech bubble. We are even higher valuations today in my analysis and in the way that I look at it. And it's because we have unsustainably high profit margins and unsustainably high growth rates that have all been great for the Mag 7 type stocks. But these profit margins, these growth rates, they're unsustainable. And when you stack the really high record valuations on top of it, we're near what I think is the peak. I've said it before, and I've been early, and we've had fits and starts of being right. But I think we're near the peak of one of the biggest stock market bubbles of all time. We're not giving up on our short positions in our global macro and long short hedge funds as a result. I think this is a time more than ever that you want to employ a Nassim Taleb style of strategy using put options to get that asymmetric upside to a potential major down move in the market. I don't know when it's going to happen, but that allows you to stay in the game and only lose a little bit of money, as those put options may not be working, but then be able to capitalize on them when you do get that dislocation in an asymmetric way. That's how we were able to capitalize earlier this year in those two funds. It's why they're some of the top performing funds in the world year to date. That's both the global macro and the long short fund. And especially in April, but also in February of this year, when the Mag 7 were correcting, we were able to capitalize on that, and we were able to ring the register on those put options in a way that preserved those profits too. Given where we are now with the market retesting all-time highs once again, with volatility very low, it's an excellent time I think to put on that type of exposure and strategy. Having some put options on S&P 500, NASDAQ, on Mag 7 stocks is, I think it's an incredible time to do that. I think the rest of the world is completely on the opposite side of the boat there, and that's why we're in a bubble that's one of the biggest ever. So I'm going to move it on to Tavi here. Let's keep going.
All right, I'm unmuting here. So thanks for Kevin, and I'll start my presentation. So one thing I find it interesting, a bull market usually is initially led by gold prices, and then it starts to spread across the riskier parts of the market. And it is remarkable that since April 21st of this year, gold has sort of peaked, right? And it's gone sideways, essentially, as you can see in this chart. That's the yellow line. And you can see the blue line, it's the Precious Metals Explorers. I think that's the best proxy for this, is the TSX Venture, looking at this specifically at the sub-industry group of precious metals. And so you can see that's up about 30%, while gold is essentially flat, as I said. I do think that's the beginning of in my view, the beginning of outperformance trend of this industry and this part of the industry, and it's starting to trickle down, as you can see, in our own portfolio, but also in this index alone is remarkable to see this type of returns despite this downward or downside or a sideways movement in the gold price. Let's go to the next chart. And this chart now is something that comes to my mind as far as appreciation for what's been happening recently, where we've had an environment where metal prices have been very high relative to energy costs. And that speaks volumes about margins of most mining companies. And we're seeing this now with all sorts of companies reporting earnings more recently and surprising the market on the upside with margins continuing to expand. And so every day you see these margins, or I should say, the gold to oil ratio staying at one of the highest levels in history, or something that people don't talk about often. But it's not just gold, it really is silver. And you can even put copper into this chart as well. I didn't want too busy of a chart, but even copper prices relative to oil look historically high. And so essentially, in my view, is it means that every day we spend on this ratio remaining at these levels, at least, it means that these companies are going to be most likely continuing to have very strong margins moving forward. So this is, in my view, also an opportunity for a lot of these companies to be hedging their energy costs, but also extending to see this type of earnings releases that we're seeing in some of the major companies. And I'm going to show a few of those companies here, and it's not to pick individually in some of them, but it's more to show some of these stocks that have very long history. Are fascinating to see this trend that they've been breaking out of, and I think it's just the early stages of a much bigger move. Let's go to the next chart. So in the next chart, I'm just showing something I've been updating recently as we get these earnings reports from most of the major companies. In this case, we're looking at the 50 largest mining companies in the Canadian and US stock exchange because they have easier data to analyze. And as you can see, the blue bars is looking at the median all-in sustaining cost. And all-in sustaining costs, and some people have issues with that because it doesn't include some other things that are certainly important when it comes to looking at the overall structure of cost of an own business. But despite that, and its own flaws, you can see the gold prices in yellow are clearly substantially higher than those blue bars. We probably have not seen anything like this in a very long time. I like to call this the golden age of mining that I think we're entering. And that's just because of this production margin it's something I have not experienced in my career. And I think majority of us either watching this or living through this era have also not seen this, even going back to the 1970s. Just if you go back real quick to the prior chart, one thing that is remarkable about this as well is that in the prior chart, the gold to oil ratio or the gold to silver ratio, we're not anywhere close to this levels that we are today compared to what we saw back in the early 2000s. And so, this just trying to show that these types of profitability that we're seeing across these companies is something very unique. I won't call unprecedented, but I will call unique to this era. And maybe it's a perfect storm, given not storm, but perfect setting, given the fact that there's so much skepticism towards this industry. And usually skepticism is built over a long period of time of negative events in this industry. Certainly, misallocation of capital, depleting capital, and all sorts of things that have caused this industry to carry that burden of being capital bleeders and not necessarily have leverage to gold prices, of which leverage works both ways. We've seen historically, leverage worked in a very bad way for the mining industry. Therefore, this reputation, this negative reputation. But now we're starting to see the other side of this, and it seems to me that skepticism remains much higher or more prominent than the actual results that we're seeing. Therefore, why these positive surprises are probably just getting started. Let's go to the next chart. In the next chart, you're looking at the silver mining industry. I think Kevin doesn't like this junior miners, but it is the name of the ETF. SILJ is just one vehicle that you can invest in, and supposedly smaller companies in the juniors in the silver space that have higher exposure to silver. Now it's not a perfect ETF because bunch of these companies, not all of them have, a silver exposure. If you're an investor in the space, you know that it is very difficult to find a company that owns a project with basically primary metal being mined than silver, and so it is a difficult a vehicle to build. However, doing our best and seeing companies that have very large exposure to silver relative to others, and looking at that relative to the actual metal price, you're just starting to see this line break a downward trend, and potentially usually. Well, why do I show these lines? And you see a few of those in this presentation is because when you have those breaks, you tend to see historically a momentum in prices on either the upside or the downside, depending on how the line has been broken. In this case, I believe that this is a real breakout, and potentially we could see much higher prices. And as we see the leverage to metal prices working on the positive side, not the negative side this time around. Again, cycles change, and if we are not in a bull market for gold and silver and copper and others, the leverage would work the other way. It is not my view, and I don't think it's the view of the firm. And so why we have conviction on buying companies that are in the mining space. Let's go to the next chart. Next chart is showing for illustrative purposes only. You can see a chart that shows basically stages of a bubble. And in this case, if I would point out where we are here, I think we're maybe transitioning away from where the smart money has been accumulating capital and deploying and allocating into these assets, and starting to see the awareness from what is called the awareness phase, but it's where institutional investors are beginning to either ask questions, start to deploy capital into this industry, and I think that's what's called in this stages of a bubble, the takeoff phase. And I believe we're still in that, starting to get into that part of it. I mean, we can argue where we are here, but that's just my sense of I think we have a pretty good pulse of this market given our position here as allocators in this industry, and for being as Kevin said, it's been 5 years that we've been in this potentially the smart money phase of accumulating assets in this industry, and so this takeoff phase is potentially just getting started. And again, just views for illustrative purposes only. This is not a perfect framework for an industry or anything like that. Let's go next chart. All right, next chart, we're looking at the largest North American silver mining company today. And why am I showing this is because I like these charts that have very long history. There are not a lot of companies out there. Mining industry is a very complex space, and a lot of companies go bankrupt during the wrong times of the cycle. And so it is important when you have a company that has endured during multiple cycles in this industry. And so in this case, we have a Hecla Mining that goes back to all the way to the 80s in this chart. And if you draw a line all the way from the very peak of that moment when we saw silver prices approaching $50 an ounce and so forth. Today we just broke that downward trend. I mean, it's a again, it's been a very difficult period. Although we've had some eras like the early 2000s that were very beneficial for the mining space. Still, the margins that we're seeing today are nowhere close to what we saw back in those days, and so it is to me a very important aspect that we're seeing the break of a major downward trend potentially if we continue to see these moves. I mean, this chart is a quarterly candle chart, and so it's a very long term and completely ignoring the daily moves in not ignoring, but I should say reducing the relevance of short term moves is probably the right way to describe this. And so, in fact, the next chart is looking at not in the silver space, but in the gold space and copper space. I find it interesting that Barrick changed its name from Barrick Gold to Barrick Mining just because of their large exposure to copper as well. But we can say that these things happen in different parts of the cycle as well. And I'm not going to get into that, but the point being is that Barrick is also starting to break out, and I noticed this in a few moments in prior presentations. If you listen to these presentations in the past, and I think it's just the beginning again of a bigger move. And Barrick has been a big lagger for the right reasons, by the way. In my view, but eventually, as I said, eventually the money trickles down into this whole industry, and even companies that investors have been very skeptical about it are also starting to make money, and Barrick is no different in this case. It's been certainly fundamentally improving over time, and I think that this breakout looks really attractive and compelling as well. Let's go to the next chart. Now we're seeing something that happened recently with refined copper, removal from the tariff situation, and therefore copper prices collapse about 20% in one day after going up by about 10 or 15% in one day as well. And it, forcing a lot of questions here now. Gold as well, seeing these tariffs imposed in the US for bars, gold bars, potentially related to the situation between Switzerland and the United States in terms of trade agreements. But I'm not going to even get into that. My point is, if you're an investor in this industry and you're seeing gold prices continuing to do well, and and there's a lot of concerns when you have copper prices declining as much as they did, in that day. And in my view, as I usually say, you can borrow someone's thesis all day long. You can say, well, I think, I think what Tavi or what Kevin or what Quinton is saying looks very compelling, and maybe I'm going to start investing in this industry. A lot of people do that, right? Not just with us, but with other folks and that speak their views in about markets. But it's really where to build wealth, in my view, is being able to take advantage of these market fluctuations, of which none of us have control over, and that level of volatility that you tend to see, of which is in a lot of ways unjustifiable given the long-term trend that we may see. I mean, if as you can see this chart, the whole point of it is showing, look, gold and copper move very close to each other over time. If gold continues to do well, in our view, copper should also perform very well. And so, as we see these types of volatility events, I think those are more windows of opportunities rather than the other way around. So I'm not scared of volatility. I think we should, as investors, embrace it, in fact. And so that's my point. Let's go to the next chart. In the next chart, I think, if you ask me, this is the most important macro chart that is, important here. Some of them, some folks like to just watch, some others like to invest, and some others like to just have a view. I don't care where you fall into those categories. This chart is very relevant for macro views, and the dollar holds the key for a lot of different themes, macroeconomically speaking. And in my view, the DXY index is just a basket of currencies with a lot of weight in the euro, the British pound, the Japanese yen, and some other developed economies. But those three are really the main part of it. And what you're seeing here is a very long-term trend where the dollar price versus those currencies have performed very well. And perhaps the whole idea of bringing capital into the U.S. as we see the dollar as well performing so strong throughout those decades. And in my opinion, this I think these cycles, just like any other cycles, and why they're called cycles is because they move from an upward trend to a downward trend, and then from an upward trend again to now a downward trend. And I think it's sometimes difficult to envision, the dollar being, now the best of all dirty clothes out there, and perhaps entering a downward cycle is maybe difficult to imagine. But I firmly believe that if we want to fix the trade balance issue and the deficit issue that we have on the fiscal imbalance, it is almost inevitable and unavoidable, in my opinion, that the dollar needs to be devalued substantially relative to other currencies. And so, in my view, since we've had a big decline here in this DXY index, we hit the major support line. And an investor, it would be normal to see some level of a bounce. We did see a bounce, and now what? Now we go up from here, or do we continue on the downward trend and break that support and go a lot lower? My view is the latter. No, my view is that this is the beginning of a multi-year downward trend for the dollar. And what I find it fascinating about macro is that you can sort of, a lot of times it's very difficult to see a trend that unleashes all at once. I think, as I said before, my belief is that investments is all a way of accepting. It's an exercise of acceptance of risk. And a lot of times it's one currency or asset class that tends to have an easier thesis to understand from an institutional standpoint, is the one that leads the pack, and then you tend to see the unleashing of others. In the case of precious metals was gold, and then you're seeing how other metals start to follow, and things like royalty companies, and then the senior producers, and then that have done their homework, and then the other senior producers that have not done their homework are now moving, the junior miners, the explorers. And so you start to see this trickle down of acceptance of risk. The same thing happens here. So if you go to the next chart, which ones are those currency pairs that have started to make a major move? Well, the euro has certainly started to move. So the US dollar has been depreciating relative to the euro, as it shows in this chart. Already broke that trend line, as you can see. If you go to the next one, it shows the British pound. It also does the same. And in fact, this recent appreciation that we saw of the dollar relative to the British pound only retested this support that is now going to become a major resistance, in my view. And so, if you are of that opinion, you would think that this candles are going to continue to move on the downward trajectory here. And again, these are just views. Nobody has a crystal ball to really know if that's the case, and we're just using political and fiscal constraints and macro constraints to have an opinion on these asset classes that are so important to unleash other ideas that I'll talk about in a minute. If you go to the next chart, I'll show you another one that has not moved as much. I mean, that's the Japanese yen. The Japanese yen, if we use the same idea, the Japanese yen remains at a very high level relative to these other currencies that have already and in my view, likely to retest that line again and go even break that at some point. And why we're seeing the 30-year yield in Japan is starting to move, and all these long-term yields are starting to move in that are likely to give even
Tavi, your sound's cutting out a little bit now. See if he can get that fixed up.
Am I back? Can you hear me okay?
Now you're back.
All right, I'm sorry. So I was talking about the Japanese, and if we go to the next chart, in what shows is that the Japanese yen had one of its largest appreciations and on last Friday on a daily basis. The last time we saw this was when the BOJ started to loosen up their yield curve control situation, allowing the 10-year yield in that case to start running to the upside. And people said, well, they're losing control over things and so forth. The BOJ doesn't have control. I actually think that what's happening, they're allowing those yields to move a lot higher because it doesn't really matter, especially the 30-year side doesn't matter as much in regards to what's been happening with their situation on the debt front. Majority of the terming of their debt is actually way below the 30-year, and the average maturity is way below 30-year. So the rise of the 30-year yield is sort of irrelevant. In fact, the only thing it does, it gives further support to the Japanese yen to rise. And so, as you can see here, I do think that this is we're going to see these moves more often, not less often. So again, just my opinion. Let's go to the next chart. Another currency pair that I think is making a really significant move, and I think it's again also part of this trend as well. And I'll speak a little quickly about this. But the Brazilian real is one of the best performing currencies this year, and in my opinion, is also going the same direction of the euro and the British pound and potentially the Japanese yen, eventually touching that support line, which in this case is at around 5 or so level. And if so, I do think eventually we break that line and go much lower. Again, an acceptance of risk. It starts with the euro, starts with the British pound, and then you start going down into the riskier parts of the market to make a play on the potential domino fall of these currencies. Let's go to the next chart. As if you take a look now, I was looking at US dollar versus let's go to the next chart real quick. But if you go to we're looking at the Brazilian real in the prior one, but this one is actually an equal weighted index of a lot of emerging market currencies. And you can see now we're looking at the opposite way, just to don't confuse your mind, but we're looking at the opposite way of what we were looking at before. So the fact that this chart is going up, it means that the emerging market currencies are actually outperforming the dollar. What I find fascinating about this chart is that there's a very, very long-term downward trend as well. We broke out of that and retested the line again. And, and it's normal. We've had a bunch of Brazilian equities, Chilean equities, Argentinian equities, all of these things actually sold off recently. And, again, you're being tested on your thesis, but ultimately, I think these things continue to move on the upward trajectory. And this break that you're seeing here, I believe, is a real break and will likely create momentum on the upside, not the other way around. Let's go to the next chart. And the next chart, I'm just showing the something fascinating as well is what's been happening politically and the structural changes we're seeing in Argentina. To me, are remarkable, really. And what we're seeing in terms of credit creation in the private sector there is surging, as you can see in this chart. Is something to be aware of. It's something that we also saw in the prior emerging market cycle or downward movement of the dollar or bullish environment for commodities, hard assets, gold. All these things are very linked. It is important to see. Now we're seeing something similar to what we saw in the mining industry, right? We saw, some specific companies that have better margins, arguably even better management and so forth, is starting to attract capital before some other major companies. And now, that money, as I said, is starting to trickle down into other parts of the industry with higher risk. The same thing is probably happening in emerging markets. the fact that we're seeing the structural shifts in Argentina taking place, and in a way they've been doing their homework. They're attracting capital first, and so usually why you see this is outperformance in their stock market as well, relative to other places. But eventually, I think it's gonna flow through the whole region. That's my 2 cents. Let's go to the next chart. All right. Well, this is an important thing. Stephen Moran was, potentially, who knows if he's going to become the Fed chair, but he's in a very strong position to potentially become the Fed chair, and has done a lot of work and in terms of sharing his macro opinions and so forth. And what I find it interesting about all this is what we are likely to see potentially with interest rates. And if we go to the next chart, one of the things I had high conviction from the beginning of the I would say last year or so, is that the 2-year yields are going to continue to fall. I thought we would see the development of this trend much quicker, and so I'm a little shocked that, or surprised, not shocked, but surprised that we haven't seen a bigger move on the downside of the 2-year yield. But I still think that's eventually going to be the case. We're going to see, in my opinion, much lower yields in the short end of the curve, in order to basically apply fiscal dominance in a certain way, and reducing interest payment on the debt, and allowing this increasing non-mandatory is increasing, potentially, or as I like to say, pro-growth spending is likely to increase as we see the interest payment on the debt substantially being reduced by lowering rates. And I do think that eventually we're going to get into that path. Now, there's 2 sides of this. There's Jay Powell's side, of which likes to say inflation has not gone away, or you have the other side of Trump saying that we need to reduce rates because we can't afford these interest rates. I think both sides are right. I would argue that both sides have a point. So, I'll try to make my point quickly here. Go to the next chart. Quickly, if you want to find a reason to lower rates on the unemployment side, I know there has been a lot of questions about the data and so forth. I do think the unemployment rate, or unemployment, or labor markets have been deteriorating. And you can see this by several ways. In fact, I think these numbers from GDP are much weaker than under the surface than a lot of people are believing recently, with saying that that especially tech investors, you hear them a lot of times talk about GDP numbers, perhaps without doing as much work in terms of what is really driving that data. And if you take out what's been happening with imports and exports, majority of the data does not look like, especially from a personal consumption standpoint, that the economy is really booming. And so it doesn't surprise me that labor markets are in fact deteriorating. And the numbers you're seeing in the screen are 2 examples. On the top line, you're looking at the ISM employment, which has nothing to do, is really a survey across managers in the manufacturing space. And the second side of it is the second panel here. We're looking at unemployment rates, as usually they cross that 3-year moving average. We tend to see a upward movement in unemployment rates being supposedly continuing to happen. So I think that's going to be the case. That's my view on this. But let's go to the next chart, because one thing that Jay Powell likes to say is that inflation is not contained. I don't disagree with him, and I cannot understand why people were saying that, and I think this is a little bit imposed by the media as well, that inflation has been cured. The problem is being cured. And I don't think at all that's the case. I mean, if you look at commodity prices equal weighted, I mean, forget about egg prices or oil prices or metal prices. I'm not talking about one specific commodity. Let's look at the whole basket together and weight this equally and see where we are. Well, we're up about 12%, double digits in 1 year. So, that's your real inflation. That's your real inflation that just enters the system in a large way. That's your real world inflation, not the CPI. And so, in my view, that's something Jay Powell is not wrong. I mean, yeah, inflation has not been cured at all. The problem is still with us and very likely to stay with us for the long for the long term. Anyways, let's go to the next chart because the commodities equal weighted index tends to be as well potentially a leading indicator for inflation expectations. When you look at the market expectation for inflation on the 10-year yield, which are 10-year break evens that tries to price where they think the CPI rate will be. Um, and there's a very strong correlation throughout history between commodities and inflation expectation. And recently, we're seeing the divergence of the two, but inflation expectations are starting to catch up with the red line. In my opinion, that's just the beginning. In my opinion, we're going to see a very significant catch up on the white line with the red line, particularly with all that it's happening. I mean, money supply making new highs. We're now the situation with the Fed, forcing the Fed's hand to potentially reduce rates on the face of all this. I mean, this is what I call a supercharged environment for hard assets. In fact, if you go to the next chart, what is even more fascinating is what's been happening with this revaluation of gold discussion. His name is principal economist at the Fed, Colin Weiss, has reported this paper of which, and I'll give my hat tip to Luke Groman. That was the first person I saw that posted this paper, and I start looking deeper and deeper into this. But basically, gives accounting steps even and ways to how this whole revaluation would occur. It goes back into many other instances in history where other countries have done that. And the bottom line of this that he says is, the whole point of the paper is to say that, look, I mean, these things are your last resort type of policy, one, and that it doesn't structurally fix the issue. Now, I don't disagree with that. Now, do we have a lot of options? I don't think so. I think eventually, and I would say that there's a lot of expectations that at some point the Treasury will perform this revaluation of gold. And if that's the case, I think it's likely to happen much earlier than people think. And so eventually, I think this is going to be a very important policy that will take place. But again, that's just my opinion. Anyways, I think this is my last chart. I think we can go on to Quentin Haney's side of the presentation. Thank you.
All right. Welcome to the Crescat updates. I am recording this on Thursday evening, so this is actually August 7th. I had to make a recording because I'm going to be offline tomorrow. In fact, I'm going to be offline for a few days. It's been a bit busy summer. I got to say, it's been really busy. It feels good to see, we'll call it a bull market return in precious metals. We're seeing a lot of activity. I've been up in the Yukon. I've been up in BC, been over to Ireland recently. I'm going to Bolivia shortly. I've been to Japan. I've been all over the place. And because of that, I've had to kind of go Grizzly Adams like here. To be frank, I don't have time in the morning to even shave at this point. It is so busy, but it's a good busy. I like busy. All right. Look, I thought I'd throw this slide up just to kind of orient people. Why the heck do we do this? Why do we focus on something that's seemingly abstract? Basically two metals that are on the periodic table. One of them happens to be shiny and yellow, and the other one is kind of a lustrous white. But these metals are important. I would say if there's anything about these that people could argue, why is it important to have gold? It's important because gold is money. Now, they might argue that silver is actually money. In fact, 100 years ago or even 50 years ago, if you'd ask the average person, what was in their pocket, they'd probably say, oh, I got a dime and a quarter. And that, silver is more commonly thought of as money, or by the common man is money. But gold, in its own right, is a huge store of wealth, a huge store of value, and it is the ultimate form of money. And I think what we're seeing here, my view of what's happening over the past few months, is kind of a renaissance in the view that gold and silver have a place in the world as perhaps even the backing of currencies at some point. I think you're starting to see a lot of folks, even we'll call it young folks, that might be more intrigued in the cryptocurrency world, take an interest here. And I can say that with all honesty, because I've actually been dealing with a few folks like this, and there is a genuine interest. There's a genuine interest in these precious metals and their purpose in society. And I think it's a wonderful thing, because that renaissance in interest that we're seeing in these metals is now starting to bring in capital into the mining sector. It's capital that's needed for gold and silver, but it spills over. It goes into copper and other things too, which is absolutely critical, absolutely vital. Okay, so this renaissance, are we at the peak of it? Are we at the peak of a bull market? I don't think so. Like, I've lived through at least 4 big cycles in my lifetime. This feels like the very early stages, in my view, of a bull cycle, and I really hope that's the case, because we need to see the whole industry revitalized. We need to see some young investors come into the space, and I finally think we're starting to see that. And I'll be able to talk more about that in the not too distant future. I did point one of these young investors to take a position in a new, or I should say, a gold company that's going to be building a world-class gold mine in Canada soon. I think it's an absolutely fantastic period in history. All right, let's get going. We're going to do some updates. Look, Snowline, I have to really plow through this, because this news release that came out, it came out today, actually. Thank goodness, because I was able to put it into this video. It really speaks volumes about the upside that Snowline has on its vast land holdings across the east central part of the Yukon. This Tintina belt, the intrusive belt that hosts these reduced intrusive gold deposits, it usually generates clusters of these things. You get one magma coming up, and usually there's others coming up nearby, simply by virtue of the fact that they all are derived from greater magma chambers at depth. Do all of them carry gold deposits? No, not necessarily, but can they? Yeah, they can. And this company is doing a great job exploring right now. Let's go to the next slide. We're going to talk about a new discovery that happens to be right next to Valley. If you look at this image here, the pink blob is basically the footprint of the intrusion that they see at Valley, at this basically drilled out target at this point. Valley, of course, is about a 9 million ounce M&I resource, a wonderful deposit. It's one of the most consistent, most predictable, well-behaved gold deposits I've ever seen in my career. But is it all done? No, they've actually found a new zone, and you can see it off there on the right-hand side. We'll talk about that in a minute. Now, a lot of people looked at this news release, and there is a table of assays. There are a few holes that they drilled apparently early this season that have got some interesting results, albeit they're all around the fringe of the deposit. So the assays in the table are basically from holes that are kind of demarking the limits of the Valley zone. Some interesting numbers, but nothing out of this world. But what I want you to pay attention to on this image are the holes that have the little yellow polka dots. The little yellow dots represent identification of gold particles in sheeted quartz veining. And they have a number of holes. Note they have a number of holes even around Valley that display quite a bit of gold. We'll probably see some really amazing results. Notice they've turned the drill around. They're actually drilling in some different directions. I'm not exactly sure what that is. Maybe it's a recommendation from their technical people or something to get some holes from different angles. But you can see there's a lot of veins with a lot of gold in those holes. So I think we're going to see some good news out of those. But way over here on the right-hand side, look at that. You got 2 holes, 143, and I can't see the number on the other one, but there's another one slightly to the right of that even that has a lot of little yellow polka dots clustered together, and they're right on along the fringe, the margin of that intrusion. Okay, do we know what this gold zone is? And note that it carries on all the way up to the northeast there, with the hole that's coming in right up there in the north edge of the slide. That's also seeing gold. So do we know what this is? No, but last year, hole 115 saw some really interesting results, including a short interval, 15.5 meters at 2 grams. Okay, that's significant. What do we expect at a 143? Don't know yet. Very anxious to see, but I would expect some pretty decent assays. Is that zone open? Yes, it's wide open. Do we know what's happening further to the northeast, for example, or even along strike? Nope, we don't. They're going to have to do some more drilling here, but this is exciting. It means there's a new discovery right under their nose here. Let's go to the next slide. This image simply shows a cross-sectional view through the valley deposit, which is over here on the left. So the bright colors, that's the block model. And you can see all the drill holes they have there, very tight spacing at this point, I think 50-meter spacing, something like that. But then that one hole, 143, that they've recently drilled has some very long runs with visible gold. So I would expect some decent numbers out of those. If you compare that visually to what you see on the left, we should expect some good values. What does it mean right now? We don't know. It's the only hole out there, and it's really wide open in all directions. This is exciting. Maybe they have a new discovery. All right, let's go to the next slide. Now, these are core photos from that hole. This is core from 143. And you can see the sheeted veining looks almost identical to everything they've seen to date over in the proper, the valley proper, okay? The deposit that they've drilled up, that core, that rock looks a heck of a lot like what you see right here. So the sheeted veining, I think, in my view, should return very similar values. It should behave very similarly to what we saw over at Valley. But again, it represents a new discovery. All right, let's go to the next slide. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. They've been drilling new targets. And I'm going to talk about some of those because in the news release, there are a number of targets they tested that I think are going to perhaps deliver a new discovery or two. Okay, this is exciting stuff. Now, firstly, to orient yourself, the gold star in this image right there, that's the valley deposit. Okay, so there's where valley's located. And you can see there's a number of blue stars around it. These are targets that they are drilling this year. And I'm going to mention a number of these, like Aurelius, which is to the northwest, and JP, which is to the southwest, and Duke, which is over here to the southeast. And I think there's even one other. I can't remember which one it is. But, if I mess up here and you need to refer back to the slides, just rewind the YouTube video over the weekend and you can find this map and look closer. But let's talk about some of this new drilling they're doing, because I think this is an unbelievable success this year. I think they're starting to see some new signs of new deposits. Go to the next slide. Okay, this is up at the Duke target. Okay, so this is, if you look in the description down here, this is 11 kilometers southeast of Valley, and they are seeing sheeted veining. Okay, and the sheeted veining is in intrusion. In fact, there's a fair bit of acicular veining, very fine grain, we'll say near amorphous arsenopyrite in this. That's really interesting. This is a bit different flavor system, but the sheeted veining is really promising. If anything, I view this as a higher level within a reduced intrusive system. Okay, so this is exciting. They might be on the tippy top of a fully preserved, valley type target here. Okay, now this hole went down, I think, well over 400 meters, but you can see that thing looks like it's juiced up. It is hosted by an intrusion. You can see this kind of speckled nature of the intrusion in a few of those rows, but in many places, the intrusion itself is kind of obfuscated by kind of a cloud of fine arsenopyrite, which is kind of the grays and stuff that you see modeled through there. Okay, that's really interesting stuff. Don't have assays, but this looks good. Looks yummy. Let's go to the next slide. All right, this is some core from the JP target. Now this looks more classical, say valley type stuff. Okay, this is a granite or granodiorite. It's kind of a dark speckled rock, and you can see in here some pretty distinct quartz vein, like sheeted quartz veins. Some are skinny, maybe a few millimeters, and then some are up to maybe a few centimeters long. But this is very typical of what is seen over at Valley. They do note that they've seen bismuthinite and trace visible gold in this. In fact, the little orange flag there, I think, is an area where they see visible gold. You know, is it a dead ringer for Valley? It's a little different, but man, this is starting to look like the real thing. Is it a full-on discovery yet? Don't know. We got to see the assays. Maybe they're near something too. Okay, this kind of looks to me like some of the holes that are more on the fringe of the Valley discovery. So maybe this hole is simply one that's near something. But let's wait. Let's see some assays. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, the Aurelius target. Now, bear in mind they drilled here last year, and this time they were able to get some holes down a bit deeper. I think, if anything, the drilling they did last time was a little bit shallow. I think there was some challenges drilling, mainly because the rock was kind of broken up in the near surface. But in this case, they've gotten these holes down. These core images that you see here come from over 100 meters depth. And it does show an intrusion and nice sheeted veining. Okay, there is some oxidation that's kind of orangey colored that's penetrating down to this level. But otherwise, this looks a heck of a lot like the sheeted veining that we see at Valley. Okay, so once again, very interesting telltale signs of a reduced intrusion. Do we have assays yet? No. Is there visible gold in here? They don't mention it in this guy. But does it mean there isn't any? Well, we've been learning from Rackla that you don't necessarily have to have visible gold in some of these. So again, we'll wait. We'll see what the assays say. Interesting stuff. Now, this next slide, go to the next one, is actually an outcrop. Okay, and this is the Ramsey target. I didn't point out Ramsey in the map that we looked at earlier, but this looks really interesting. Now, this was an outcrop discovery. Okay, this is basically an outcrop where they pushed away the bush, dug the soil off and cleaned it up a bit. And they're seeing sheeted quartz veins in granodiorite. Now, last year, I believe it was, they got some really nice numbers here, including 86.5 gram per ton gold off a rock chip sample out of this target. Clearly, they wanted to get back there and do some more work. And lo and behold, they've opened this thing up. And what intrigues me is that looks a heck of a lot like the outcrops at Valley. Like it's a dead ringer. Okay, so this one, it hasn't been drilled. I think they're going to be drilling it here soon, but it looks very, very similar to the Valley discovery outcrops that I saw when I was there a couple of years ago. All right, so lots of exciting stuff happening. The company does a great job all the time. I think, there's any story that's like just riveting because it's kind of a hybrid between left-hand side Lassonde curve and development side. I saw Craig Hart, by the way, a couple of days ago. He was here in Colorado at a conference, and he told me they're going full bore on putting the team together and doing the hard work of getting a mine, the test work, the baseline work and stuff done so that they can advance permitting and engineering and things like this. This company is making the right moves. All right, let's go to the next slide. Now, you cannot swing a cat in the Yukon without hitting gold, and I am just absolutely thrilled to see these results out of Sitka. I was up there a few weeks ago. I went to the site. I got to see all of these different targets. Some I stood on them, some I had to look at from a distance, but they were drilling at Rosgobble while I was there. And these two holes that came out, both are over 100 gram meter holes. I'll note that. They come from just a small part of a very large target at Rosgobble. It's intrusive. So one of these reduced intrusions, and it's yielding very good results already. Yeah, 152 meters of a gram. But then you can see there's 114 meters, 1.11 gram in the hole right below the second bullet down there. So holes, 3 and 5 have yielded some nice plus 100 gram meter intercepts. Let's look at this a little more detail. Let's go to the next slide. Here's the table. There is higher grade in here, and notice there's some grades up to 9 grams in the first hole there and 12 grams in the second hole. Okay, and that's a little bit, in other words, it's a little bit more nuggety, not quite. I mean, I'm not going to say nuggety because it's still pretty consistent mineralization, but you don't see that many higher grade sub intervals within, say, snowline. It's more generally spread through the stuff. This, you do see places where there are spikes of higher grade, which is interesting. And it actually is a placer deposit. Like there's a placer coming off of Clear Creek. So I would expect there to be some coarse particulate gold in a system like this, and we're probably seeing it in some of this assay data, and that's just fine. It doesn't matter to me. But this is exciting, very long runs, very good solid gold mineralization that can be bulk mined. Notice both of these holes are basically the assays are starting right near surface, 3 meters and 4.2 meters below surface. Yep, this is a new discovery. Let's go to the next slide. And you can see where these holes fit. The darker black intervals or drill holes that you see there right in the middle of the slide, those are the ones that have been announced here. But notice they have a whole bunch of more holes that they've drilled here recently. In fact, when I was there, the company was intensely drilling in this area to try to expand this thing. The colors that we're seeing there, the kind of shaded greens and yellows and reds, that's the soil data. Okay, and there's a good stout gold anomaly here. Notice the footprint of the gold anomaly is much bigger than the area they've drilled to date. I would expect this thing to grow. It looks similar in scale to the gold anomalies further north up at Blackjack and Eiger and stuff like that. So I would not be surprised to see this target expand greatly through drilling over the next few months. All right, let's go to the next slide. Here's a cross-sectional view of hole 3. You can see the way the gold is distributed down the hole. There is a pretty consistent zone from basically grassroots down a little over 150 meters depth down the hole, which in this case is a little over 100 meters below surface. And you can see there's another hole that's off the same pad that's a bit of steeper angle. They see visible gold in that too. I wouldn't be surprised to see some decent runs there. This is basically an open pit type discovery in my view. This stuff is near surface. It's wide open. Remember Blackjack, they found the higher grades at depth. Could that be the case here? Yeah, I think so, likely. Okay, but this is a really good start, and I think this result is compelling. It's a resoundingly above 100 gram meter hole. Let's go to the next slide. Here's some of the core from that. It's very similar to what they see elsewhere on the property. So this porphyry, this kind of black and white rock, speckled rock, looks almost identical to the porphyry that they see up at Blackjack and then up at Pukaman as well, all right, and even Eiger. They see this textured rock. So I think that the upside down cow, the mothership down there, is kicking off these porphyries, and they are intimately associated with gold mineralization. The veins there, they do have some smaller ones, like occasionally you see a little skinny guy, but a lot of these veins are actually bigger. Okay, they're bigger and fatter, and that might be partly explaining where the higher grade gold comes from. The bigger veins might be accounting for that. But otherwise, it is a classical reduced intrusive type gold system. All right, so this is very nice looking rock. Remember, I saw scheelite when I was there, and I'm really intrigued with the tungsten numbers that they might have in this rock too. Guess maybe we'll find that out at some point. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and this is hole 5, another cross-sectional view. Again, stout interval, starts at grassroots, goes down almost 100 meters vertically below surface. It's about 115 meter down the length of the hole. It's 1.11 gram. Yeah, there's some higher grade intervals in there, but overall, it's a nice continuous run of gold mineralization. Notice the 2 other holes that have been drilled on this section that don't have assays yet. They have a fair bit of visible gold present. I'm very anxious to see what those yield. Again, this looks like a near surface, basically an open pit discovery. What do I think about this property? Well, let's go to the next slide. Look, I think that this property is going to yield 4, 5, 6, maybe even more discoveries. Okay, we know Blackjack's a discovery. We know Eiger's a discovery. I think that data that they presented recently from Saddle is telling us that even between Blackjack and Niger, there's a zone developing. And again, these might connect at depth too. Don't forget that. But I think, we already see two discoveries there. But we have Pulkoman, which was drilled last year, had some pretty decent results. They're going to go back and drill some more this year. But now we have this Rosgobble, which is a bit south. It's about 5 kilometers south of the Blackjack deposit, and it's really looking pretty good. In fact, with respect to the soils are actually more subtle here, but yet the drilling is showing us we got gold. We got very good gold. Okay, there's a lot of drilling to do. This contact zone at Pokemon, I think, could yield some really nice numbers. Look at the historic drilling there. 10.7 meters at 20 grams and 38 meters at 1.5 grams. And so, that's yet to come. They're going to be back in there drilling some more here soon. The other one I'm really intrigued with is way down there in the south, that Bear Prop breccia zone. From my perspective, that is the tippy top. It's basically a breccia that's trying to make its way up to surface above a reduced intrusion. So I think just in the subsurface there, I think there's something generating that zone. It looks like the tip of an iceberg to me. So I'm just dying to see them drill some holes at Bear Prop breccia. There's also a target off this image, which is way, way over to the east. It's called the Maiku target. I was really intrigued with. I hope to drill some holes over there too. It's a whole different magma suite. Like all of the ones here kind of have the same flavor. They're all kind of this black speckled porphyry type rock. The one over to the far east, Maiku, a little bit different intrusion. Looks like a different cow, if you will, over there. But nonetheless, I think they have room for 4, 5, 6 discoveries here. What's the size of these? Well, somewhere in the maybe 1 to 3 million ounce range each. Maybe they do get better and bigger and higher grade at depth. So, the thesis is, remember, go to the next slide, the upside down cow. Okay, so we're looking at the little, what's poking up here. What are they doing at depth? We don't know yet. Okay, but that could be the big prize here. People ask me all the time, what do you think they have? Well, I think they have 3, 4, 5, 6 discoveries in the near surface environment. It's going to be millions of ounces. But what happens at depth? I don't know yet. And we got to wait to see. But, they all come together. Maybe we find the udder down there. And this turns into one of these extraordinary world-class things. Don't know. We'll see. But they're doing a great job. I love the story. And I think they have a lot of room to run. I think they're doing a great geologic work. Like the way they're drilling is exactly how I would probably approach drilling. And I think there's going to be a lot more news coming soon. Let's go to the next slide. Rakla. Okay, this is the most intriguing, I think, reduced intrusive story. And it's because of the fact that they're drilling and they're seeing sheeted veins, they're seeing the intrusive rock, they're seeing all the bells and whistles, but they don't see visible gold. And I've talked about this in several videos recently. I even made a video while I was up at site, and I think that's been put out on YouTube if you want to go search for it. Talk a little bit about this style of mineralization. There is a lot of a metal called bismuth in this system, and I think the bismuth is basically hiding the gold in plain sight. They don't see the visible gold because it's basically embedded within bismuth-bearing minerals. Now, what is this news release they put out this week? Well, they are doing a great job on their 4,000 meter drill program. They're on hole 6. They're at about 500 meter depth, and I think they're going to take this a little bit deeper. The first couple of holes, remember, they were a wee bit shorter than hoped. I think it was mainly because they didn't have the drill rods on site. All of them, it was really wet weather when I was up there, but now they have all the materials and drill rods and everything. And if you look at the drill holes, they're drilling some deeper and deeper holes. I think it's really intriguing. It's not to say you have to drill deep to see what's going on here. It's just that, they get a sense of volume. And I'll show you a cross section here in a minute. I think some of these deep holes are really going to tell us a lot about this system. All right, go to the next slide. Okay, this is a plan view of the drill array. The colored bars that you see in there, the reds and oranges and stuff, those are the density of veining that they see. So they're counting the number of little veins that they see in each meter of core. And as you can see, the lighter yellows, we're dealing with like sub 5 veins per meter. But then as you get into the oranges, 5 to 10, getting the darker orange, almost red, you're dealing with, I can't read the numbers, I think it's 10 to 25 or something like that. And then you get dark red, and you're dealing with very high density veining, I think over 25, if I'm reading the numbers correct. All right, so what does this mean? Well, it's given us a picture of the distribution of the sheeted veinings in the intrusion. And notice that they don't necessarily conform to the outcrop that they found here. This outcrop, by the way, this is an intrusive body. Okay, it's roughly a kilometer, I think a little over a kilometer in diameter. It's a pretty round feature. And they're drilling kind of along the south margin of this intrusion. And what really strikes me is that hole number 3, they were drilling that one that was there. In fact, I think they had just started it. And look at the density of veining. That's the southernmost hole there. Like, wow, that's got a lot of veining in it. Notice that at surface, you wouldn't have been able to see that because it's covered by talus scree, like the rock that's slumped down off the mountain is basically covering up that area. But the drilling is telling us, wowza, there's a lot of sheeted veins there. Okay, that's really intriguing. Holes 1 and 2, pretty interesting zones of sheeted veining, not necessarily consistent the whole way down. It's life. Okay, hole 4, lesser veins, interestingly, and even hole 5, in the middle part of hole 5, there's lesser veins. But notice that it gets into something really intense at the bottom, and also way back up at the top. Top of holes 4 and 5 have a lot of sheeted veins. Notice they backed up now and they're drilling hole 6, and that one is seeing similar high densities of sheeted veins that we see in hole 3 down here. It's just the way these things work. You gotta drill some holes to figure out what's going on. I think this data is starting to tell us what we might expect for grade. It would be nice to see visible gold. We're just not going to see it here. But does that matter that much? No, I think the assays are what's really important. Okay, let's see what the assays yield. Go to the next slide. This is a cross-sectional view. It gives you a sense of how the distribution of the veining occurs. Maybe that increase. And notice there's no marks in hole 6 because they're drilling that one. So it's just a black line past that one point. But wow, this is what I mean. That there's something happening at depth, at least in that area, where the veining is starting to just take off like a rocket. Okay, so maybe hole 4 basically touched the top of the thing, and it's belling out, and hole 6 underneath there is like catching the big whack of veining and possible mineralization. And then, even 2 and 4, why there's such a difference between them, I can't tell you. But this is interesting stuff. Very good data. Let's go to the next slide. Here's the sheeted vein. Everybody that says, this doesn't quite look like stone. It doesn't from the standpoint that there's not visible gold. Okay, and it's a little bit different intrusion. It's a little bit lighter gray, I would say. It's a granodiorite for sure, but it's a little bit lighter gray. And the veins, they tend to be more ghostly. There's 3 different types of veins. There's black tourmaline veins, there's kind of little carbonate veins, and then there's these ghostly quartz veins. But you can see it if you just step back and look, and you think, wow, look at the sheeted veining in these images. Okay, I think hole 4 is the one on the left, and then hole 5. Hole 5, for all intents and purposes, that looks like core out of snowline or something like that. So I have no issue with the level of veining that we see. The 2 images at the bottom are quite interesting because they're zoom-ins, close-ups of some of the ghostly quartz veins that are cutting the granodiorite. And where the little pointer is, just off the tip of the pointer in each case, there's some shiny silvery stuff. That's that bismuth. The bismuth mineral phases, what they are exactly, don't know, but they are potentially hiding the gold. I'll say, as strange as that sounds, that basically the gold's bound up somehow with these. We'll find out. But this is intriguing stuff. It's got the right ingredients, just doesn't have the visible gold, but it's probably there somewhere. Let's go to the next slide. I should say it's hopefully there somewhere. We'll find out. Okay, this is hole 6, I believe it is. Again, sheeted veining. Actually, some really nice regular sheeted veining. If you look at the rows up at the top, especially, you'll see just boom, 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 boom. 10 or tens of veins per meter. Okay, each row is about a meter long, by the way. And then over here, here's some close-ups again. We got at the top there, we got a black vein, which is probably tourmaline. Then you got kind of a ghostly quartz vein going through. There are little specks of bismuth in there. And on the bottom, you got two parallel quartz veins. Those little gray dots in there are also bismuth minerals. Okay, so again, hole 6 is seeing the same thing. And remember, hole 6 is really the deepest hole to date into the system. This is really intriguing. It makes my spidey senses tingle. I hope we're going to find something here. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, and if that wasn't exciting enough, now we have a company that, look, 2-3 years ago, they were drilling down south in BC, or I should say west central BC at their Cloud Drifter project, but they didn't deliver. Basically, it didn't hit much. Okay, it's not meant to be critical. It's meant to be, well, that happens. In fact, it happens more often than not. But you can really judge a company and its team by their ability to pivot sometimes. And this team has done a great job pivoting. I remember when Dustin called me up one day and he said, "I've got a new opportunity. I'm going to pursue it." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Well, it's next to Highway 37, and I'm going to call it the Highway 37 project." "Oh, okay. It's up in the Golden Triangle." I see. "All right. What is it?" "Well, look, over the course of about a year, like you remember all the news releases they had last year, they bolted together this Highway 37 project by basically buying and acquiring different pieces of ground, putting together a really robust land package in the heart of the Northern Golden Triangle. And in this package of land, they got a number of porphyry targets. But I would say that this Hank Williams, Hank Williams target is perhaps the most exciting. Not necessarily. The Hickman target looks pretty good too, but this is one they've started drilling on, and they are already seeing some really exciting stuff. Chalcopyrite and boronite mineralization in highly potassically altered porphyry at the Williams target. Let's go to the next slide and see some of this stuff. All right, so this gives you a sense of the distribution of metal. This is golden soils. You can see there's some very broad areas here with some fairly high grade, like up to gram plus type numbers in soils. Now the gold is going to reflect your higher level with the porphyry. This isn't copper, this is gold. Okay, so you're seeing like where the bright pinks are, you're probably seeing more of the epithermal level of the system, and that is why you look at the names down there. They got the lower AU is a gold Hank deposit. Well, it's the epithermal part of a porphyry. Maybe that porphyry is below, or maybe it's off to the side. I don't know, but don't focus so much on the pinks here for the porphyry itself. The pinks are telling us where the epithermal gold is. All right, but where they're drilling, okay, is up to the north there. And you can see the Williams CUAU, so copper gold deposit, and then the Williams East porphyry target. See the red traces? Those are the drill holes they've completed thus far this year. Yeah, there's historic drilling there, and you can even read some of the numbers. For example, at Williams copper gold deposit, you can see some runs like 377 meters at 0.31, I think it is, gram per ton gold, and 0.28, I think it is, percent copper or something like this. Anyway, there's some big runs, hundreds of meters of kind of 0.01 ounces, so 0.3 essentially gram gold, and about almost 0.3% copper. Those are good numbers. Those are really good numbers. Like in a dollar value rock, it's 60, 70, $75 per ton NSR value. And in my book, that's well above my kind of mental threshold for open pits, usually about 0.5, 0.55, $50 to $55 NSR value rock is usually kind of the low end of the spectrum, but this is above that, well above that. So these are good numbers. Now, what have they hit? Don't know yet because they don't have assays. They just started drilling, but they're very excited. I remember this news release coming out, I think a week and a bit ago, and Dustin called me right after and he said, "You got to take a look at the news release. This is amazing stuff. Let's look at the core." Let's go to the next slide. All right. Wow. What is this stuff? Well, this pink stuff that you see here is basically potassic alteration. The potassium that was in the hydrothermal fluids has attacked the rocks and produced potassium feldspar, which in this case takes on a very bright, like a salmon pink color. And it's just gorgeous looking rock. I mean, it's just amazing when you see this stuff up close. That is pretty much flooded the entire rock. It's the protolith, what the rock was, the porphyry intrusion that was there, is completely obliterated because the level of alteration is so intense. But this thing is just riddled with little veins, and a lot of these veins have BN. What is that? Bornite. Okay, that's a very copper-rich sulfide mineral. It's bright purple in many cases, and then they got chalcopyrite, CPY, which is a kind of brassy yellow stuff. So they see both of those copper phases in here. They even see a little bit of moly too, I think, here and there, and magnetite as well, which is MAG. But all of these veins have copper visible, copper mineral phases visible. This is exciting stuff. What does this run? Don't know yet, because this is note 25001. It's at 484 meter depth. Wowza. Okay, could they have a big interval of exciting numbers here? I think so. This company might crank out some news here. And as far as a discovery goes, this one, in my book, smells like a pretty dang big discovery. I'm very excited about it. Let's go to the next slide. This next image, I think, is one of the cooler. It's basically veins that are cut somewhat obliquely through the core, so it looks like these circles, which is interesting. But notice that the veins have dark coloration in them. That's a lot of that bornite, but there's also chalcopyrite and the bright yellowy stuff. The rock is blitzed with potassic alteration. Potassic alteration is usually right at the core of the porphyry system, so they are in the guts. Notice the rock in the background. You can even see a lot of veining there, little blebs of chalcopyrite here and there. What's not to love here? I mean, this is amazing. If this core gets assayed, I would not be surprised if it's not similar to the values they saw in historic drilling in this target. Very exciting stuff. They have drilled deeper. Okay, I think they're going to show that there's a lot more volume in this system, maybe even some higher grades with a little luck. We'll see. Let's go to the next slide. Now, we got to jump over. This is a story that I've talked about briefly, and it really popped up in the market. Like, Talon has been poking drill holes at this Tamarack project in Michigan for quite a while. It's basically a project they acquired from Lundin. Lundin kind of pulled back from mining as they mined out Eagle. They and sold it. They kind of divested a lot of their assets here. But Talon came in, and they've been drilling this darn thing for years. Okay, they've been poking away at this pretty systematically, advancing it like one would advance a normal advanced stage project towards putting together its resource and the economic studies and so forth. And lo and behold, recently the deposit has taken on a whole new life because of a discovery. In fact, they discovered this new sulfide zone at depth. This is a magmatic nickel deposit, by the way, so it's basically related to magmatism, which in this case is associated with a time period a little over 1 billion years ago when North America tried to split apart, okay? And this tension that formed, which we call the Central North American Rift System, allowed faults and stuff to penetrate deep through the crust and tap mantle magmas. Okay, so these magmas, as they came up, they carried a lot of nickel and stuff. And as they interacted with rocks, as they got closer to the surface, they soaked up some of the sulfur in the shallow crustal rocks, and that sulfur combines with the nickel and copper and platinum group metals and stuff, and it makes these wonderful magmatic, nickel sulfide or magmatic sulfide deposits. Sometimes they can be crazy high grade, and that is what they've found here. So the recent drilling that Talon has done has intersected some just crazy level grades. Now you can see the reference to the historic 8.25 meter massive sulfide intercept, which is great. I mean, it's a bit short, but nearly 13% nickel, 13.8% copper. It's got a bit of cobalt, but notice 18 grams combined platinum group metals plus gold. I mean, that is astounding. Now, there was a drill hole that they announced a couple of months ago that shot the lights out, and I don't know why they don't quote it up here in the top of this thing. Apologize, I don't have the numbers available. I think they're deeper than usually, but basically they're going back in and they're testing this same area where they can start to see a high-grade zone emerging at depth. What is this high-grade zone? Maybe it's a feeder of some sort. Maybe it's just a place where this super high-grade stuff pooled up. Maybe it's a bit of both. I don't know, but it's really exciting, and they're using some really good science to chase this thing down. Now, in this case, this most recent drill hole they announced this week, just the visuals, they don't have assays, but they hit 20.3 meters in aggregate of mixed massive nickel mineralization, and I think there's some spotted or stockwork mineralization as well, and network mineralization. Now, let's go to the next slide and talk about this because it's a really complicated deposit. Now, the image on the left-hand side there is actually the deposit, the shape of the deposit. Notice how it forms kind of a swirl like that. Well, what on earth does that? Well, guess what? Magmatic nickel sulfides, because they're like mercury or something. They follow paths in tubes and stuff. And basically, many deposits of this type have irregular shapes like this. Almost looks like some kind of CAT scan of somebody's inside or something. Looks like a colorectal deposit. But these tubes can host these sulfide deposits that are just wildly rich. What are examples? Well, look at Voisey's Bay, which was a nickel discovery many years ago. It's a great big one. What do they have here? Don't know, but we're way, way, way down there in that purple part. We'll call it the rectal part of the system, and it's starting to unfold into a very exciting discovery. Okay, it's deep, but it's exciting. Okay, now the two holes that you see there, that's basically a zoom in of the historic hole 250, and the results they got there, very stout numbers. But notice now they have another hole nearby. Now, why did they drill that hole? Well, they looked and recognized that they have what are called off-hole conductors. They did EM work down the hole, and they said, hey, I think there's something conductive nearby. Let's test that. And they came back in and they sharp shot this hole down this area. And lo and behold, not only did they hit the sulfide zone that's roughly coincident with the one in the hole over here, but they hit a brand new one above it. Okay, and in aggregate, there's 20.3 meters of what looks like it will be high-grade mineralization in these two holes, or these two intercepts combined. But that upper one, that's intriguing because that's got to go somewhere. It's got to connect in space with something else. And this is how sulfide works. You can chase these things, and they can go blow out into something really, really big very quickly. And that could happen here. I'm just saying, I remember when they were drilling Voisey's Bay and they're kind of chasing it down and it looked like it was starting to neck, and then boom, they hit the ovoid, like it was just a big puppy. Maybe they find something like that here. And I wouldn't be surprised. Let's go to the next slide. This is a close-up. It's a close-up of the rectal part of the deposit. I shouldn't say this. Basically, we're looking at the purple defines that lower mineralized zone. They've just drawn an envelope around it. Is it really all that well defined? Not really, because there's not that many drill holes down here. So this is a bit of artistic rendition. But what are these drill holes they have over here that are clustered off the side? Well, that's where they're drilling. That's where they've hit these monster intervals. Okay, and actually, here we go. Here's hole 563. This is the one that really lit the market on fire. 34.9 meters in aggregate, grading 14.8 something percent nickel, 15.3% copper, bit of cobalt, 34.14 gram per ton PGE, so platinum group elements plus gold. Holy cow. I mean, the value of that rock, like on a per ton basis, is absolutely insane. Okay, now, what are these little red squares that you see kind of sprinkled in there? Those are actually the EM anomalies. Okay, when they do drop the EM detectors down the hole and they can kind of look at what's happening around the drill hole. These are plates or projections of the EM conductors that go out in space. And this is how they basically just like carefully target the next area and the next area. And these systems grow by doing this progressive EM analysis and drilling new holes. Okay. And that's what's going to happen here. These guys are going to basically go down, drill a hole, get an intercept. Oh, okay, let's do some EM work. Oh, it looks like it's going that way. Poke another hole, maybe 30, 40 meters away. Boom, test it again. And it will grow incrementally. But it's going to be an exciting story because when you're talking about grades like this, what's not to love? I mean, this is absolutely incredible. Maybe they find something big too. You never know. Okay, that little tube. Notice how that tube is necking down there and then starting to blow out again. And we're getting into something that might have a lot more size to it. That would be amazing. And this rock is worth so much money that a small package of it even is worth a lot of money. A lot of money. Okay, it's an interesting discovery. Let's go to the next slide. El Oro, they resumed their infill and step out drilling around the high grade core area there at Isca, and they got some really nice results this week. What a time to come out with the results when you see silver moving like it did this week. And here El Oro's been putting out some nice stout numbers. They also have tin though in this. Okay, so these holes happen to be over in the western part of the high grade area where there's more tin rich material. Is there silver? Yeah, there's silver here as well. You can see the second bullet there. Some actually have fairly high grade numbers in places. But there's also a lot of high grade tin. Tin, by the way, is like $33,000 a ton. It's held tough really for years now, for 4 or 5 years. Tin is one of these metals that we as humans forgot to explore for many years. And these types of deposits don't come along all that often. So this happens to be a large tin deposit as well as silver. Let's go to the next slide and see where this is. Now I had to take the image and turn it on its side. So north is to the left. Sorry about this, but north is basically off to the left there. And the yellow circles highlight where these drill holes are. Now notice that the red oval highlights the infill that they're doing around this higher grade silver, more silver rich part of the system. And, they're doing a nice systematic job of infilling, which is great. But these holes are predominantly over on that western side, like most of these holes are in the western margin. So these are a bit of expansion as well. So we're seeing a bit of expansion as well as infill. All good stuff. The company needs to keep its nose to the grindstone, do the infill here, come up with a resource, much higher confidence resource, and probably I think will be a higher grade resource in that red target area, that red oval area. And I think this will be a very, very good story in this silver market, that's bull silver market that we're going into. Let's go to the next slide. Yukon Metals put out some news today. In fact, I talked to the company before this presentation, so I could hear firsthand what the heck is going on here. This announcement relates to the AZ project. AZ actually refers, it's not for Arizona, by the way, it's in the Yukon. Okay, AZ means that the metal, Ron Berdal named it AZ because basically the property hosts all metals from A to Z or something like this. I think that was his logic for the name he gave it. I think it's quite interesting. It's really a copper dominant target area. And the company found an outcrop. They found some samples at surface in a new area where they got good copper and gold numbers, and they drilled a hole. They basically were compelled, based on what they found early in the season, to drill what's numbered hole 4, and it does show visible copper mineralization. No assays yet, but they're going to see it come back here soon. But let's look at what they found. Go to the next slide. And you can see this is diorite as a host rock. It's basically a dark mafic rock. In this case, it's been altered to kind of a lighter gray green. And then stockwork veins. Now it's difficult to get an estimate of how much veining there is because it's really just close-up shots, but it looks like there's a fair bit of veining in places, and there certainly is chalcopyrite, which is a bright yellow stuff. What does it grade? I don't know yet. Don't know. What is it really? I don't know, because it's not quite a porphyry. Okay, this is diorite. It's a deeper level rock, but maybe there is a porphyry lurking nearby, and I think that's what the company believes. In other words, if you read through the news release, they talk about a footprint of alteration, I think 2 square kilometers in size, and they speculate that there is a porphyry likely lurking in the subsurface. While they drilled this hole as just kind of a Hail Mary after finding the rock samples, and they've hit here, I think they hit over 150 meters of stuff like this. There's a lot of work to do, okay? And I think they know that. I think they need to do soils and some other work, maybe some geophysics, and really help refine the target here. Was this luck? Yeah, it was largely driven by luck. Now we need to do a bit of science, come back, and they'll be ready next year to follow up on this. In the meantime, we got to see what this assay is. Okay, so very interesting discovery of some sort. We'll see. Maybe the assays tell us a lot more. Let's go to the next slide. And you can see from the geophysics, it's not just a small target. It's a pretty big one. It's actually down in that new target area. It's more in that vicinity where this drill hole was. I couldn't actually find the location, the precise location of the drill hole. The place I stopped was actually Chair Mountain, which is up in the northeast corner of the property. But this target, hole number 4, is down there closer to the new target tag that you see in this image. But there's a large magnetic feature there. What is it related to? It kind of looks, if you hold your mouth right, it looks like it's a circular halo of magnetism, maybe enveloping an area of lower magnetism. And we often see that, like a donut-shaped body of magnetism around porphyry, something like that. So again, they need to do some more work, collect more samples, soil samples, stuff like this, and maybe do some geophysics, refine that target, and hopefully come back and drill it next year. Now, in the meantime, the company is going off and drilling at Star River. Star River happens to be more of a sulfide replacement, CRD type system. It had some very high grades of silver and even gold. And they will be drilling there shortly. I talked to him on the phone call today. I talked to him about their plans. They've got a fairly robust program at Star River starting shortly. And they're going to sharpshoot some of the high grade discoveries that they've made there. And then they also have, I believe it's the Birch project, if I remember my names right. If I didn't remember it, forgive me, but they have another target they're going to test even later in the season. In my recollection, that was a broad copper anomaly in soil that they're going to test, believing there might be a large copper porphyry scarring system there. So the company's got a lot of news coming this year. We'll see. Maybe they jag a discovery here. Maybe they make a discovery that, quite frankly, is a sleeper in the market right now. But never know. People get lucky. Let's go to the next slide. Speaking of luck, SK. Okay, we did legwork. I'm a director of the company for disclosure. We did work way back in 2020 that identified robust stream sediment gold anomalies in the southern part of the property. And during that time period, unfortunately, we got so fixated on the VMS deposits, TV and Jeff, and that area, that we didn't focus too much effort in this gold-rich system down in the southern part of the property. But last year, sent some crews up. These are crews that have a lot of experience in the region. In fact, they did a lot of work over at Brucejack, which is about 7 kilometers to the east. And they found some amazing samples, very high-grade gold samples. We sent them back in this year to follow up, and they've expanded this new discovery, this gold system, gold vein system. It appears to be expanding very rapidly at this point.